Good evening, I am April Singh Lama and these are the headlines of the hour. The country in tatters with different groups demonstrating in the streets. Government remains a mere spectator. Asian Development Bank projects Nepal's economic growth to be limited to 4.4% against the government target of 6% for the current fiscal year. China retaliates with an 84% levy on American goods, accuses US of bullying after Trump imposes 104% tariffs. And Barcelona hosts Borussia Dortmund tonight in the first leg of the UEFA Champions League quarter-final. Match to kick off at 45 minutes past midnight. Welcome back. While the anti-establishment and pro-establishment groups continue the protest in Kathmandu, demanding various changes, the government and ruling party have limited themselves to offering formal responses. They have not been able to unite and address the concerns of the opposition or engage in discussions with the protesting groups.
Teachers, doctors, victims of cooperatives, microfinance and even monarchists are intensifying their street protests. While the ruling party seems to be turning a blind eye and the opposition is blaming the current government for all these issues and engaging in political power games, the Confederation of Teachers has been ignoring any call for negotiations.
वार्ता त गर्नु पर्यो नि त वार्ता गर्नु पर्यो वार्ता गर्दै गएपछि एउटा समस्याको समाधान हुन्छ त्यो गर्ने क्रममा आफूले सत्ता पक्षबाट मात्रै नै त्यो कतिपय कुराहरूको सम्बोधन गर्ने सम्भव छैन भने विपक्षीहरूलाई पनि साथमा लिएर यो राष्ट्रिय समस्या हो मुद्दा हो यसमा हामी चाहिँ सत्ता पक्ष र प्रतिपक्ष भएर विभाजित नहौं यी विषयहरूको समाधान गरौं भनेर समाधान गरौं त्यो अवस्थाबाट निस्किएको परिणामले यदि कानुन संशोधन गर्नुपर्छ भने यी सबैले बसेर सहमति गरेर अध्यादेश जारी गरौं भने त पास भइहाल्छ नि.
Analysts opine while it may not be possible to address the demands raised by monarchists, the issues raised by other political parties and groups can be addressed through dialogue and negotiation. They add, if parties provide good governance and effective delivery, many of these problems could resolve themselves, as the cooperatives, microfinance victims and residential doctors are only asking for the implementation of past agreements. The government, however, lacks efforts towards this direction. As many of the protesting groups are affiliated with political parties, analysts believe that the parties must take responsibility for finding solutions.
Doctor कोमा यी तीनटा दल इन्भल्भ छन् हैन यो लघु वित्तमा यिनकै मान्छेहरु रहेछन् त्यसैले यो सत्ता पक्ष र विपक्षको कुरै गरे होइन एउटा मैले कुरा गरेको कि सरकारी निकायहरुले इफेक्टिभली काम गर्ने एउटा ग्रुप हो अर्को समस्या यही तीनटा दलले छलफल गर्नु पर्यो त्यसपछि संसदमा बहस गर्नु पर्यो.
Amid all these protests, opposition parties have also been organizing their own demonstrations on the street. CPN Maui Center has blamed the current government for the rise in royalist movement and has also expressed support for the demands of teachers. However, some of these demands are unlikely to be met. Instead of encouraging dialogue, the leader of Maui Center has supported protests. The party has expressed support for a law on school education, even if it comes through an ordinance, despite previously opposing such method. The opposition's focus on political power games, rather than fulfilling their responsibility to the system, has only empowered the protesters, including the monarchists.
जसले चाहिँ सदियौं व्यवस्थालाई दोहन गरेर बसे अहिले ती चाहिँ फेरि जुरमुराउन खोजिरहेछन्. यो धमिलो पानीमा माछा मार्ने प्रयास हो र आम जनताको आक्रोश विरक्ति निराशा फ्रस्ट्रेसन भन्नुभयो तपाईले यो सबै असन्तुष्टिहरू र पीडाहरूलाई उनीहरूले दुरुपयोग गरेर सत्तालाई अहिले भएको लोकतान्त्रिक गणतन्त्रलाई चाहिँ उनीहरूले चुनौती दिन खोजिरहेछन्. यो चाहिँ राम्रो संकेत चाहिँ होइन.
It cannot be said that all demands raised during the street protests are justified. Experts say some of the teachers' demands are not in line with the current constitution. However, the main responsibility for addressing the issues raised during the protests lies with the government. The ruling parties, they say, must assist in this process and suggest for convening an all-party meeting, including the opposition, to find a solution. Experts also opine the ruling and opposition sides should come together and respond responsibly as royalists gain momentum, questioning the existing system.
The Asian Development Bank, ADB, has projected Nepal's economic growth to be limited to 4.4% against the government target of 6% for the current fiscal year. Previously, the ADB had forecasted a growth rate of 4.9%. ADB has also pointed out that if customs duties continue to rise due to the trade war, it could lead to a global recession. A global economic downturn would impact Nepal's remittance and tourism revenue, posing a significant risk. ADB also mentioned that a decline in foreign aid could hinder development projects, affecting overall economic growth. If the risks continue to rise, achieving the 4.4% target could become difficult. The ADB stated that if the government does not spend on development projects in a timely manner, it will further affect growth.
The institutional hurdles, the bureaucratic hurdles, and also the favorable environment that's being addressed by the recently announced ordinance, it has to be effectively implemented. So Nepal needs to give a clear message that it has amended its business environment. Now is the time for foreign investors to actually invest more, and also for the existing businessmen to expand their operations.
Regarding inflation, ADB's projection is that the government's target will succeed. The government aims to keep inflation within 5.5% for the current fiscal year, and ADB estimates it will stay at 5.1%. Furthermore, ADB's chief economist for Nepal, Ian Hansen, said that Trump's tax policies have weakened the growth projection and increased uncertainty. It is expected that the productive sectors, tourism and service industries will play an important role in economic growth in the current fiscal year. Moving on, teachers of community schools have been continuously protesting on the streets since 2nd of April, demanding the enactment of an Education Act. An indefinite educational strike began on the 7th. The government has been calling for talks almost every day. However, the teachers have stated that they will not retreat from the streets until the act is passed. The standoff from both sides has affected the educational calendar for the new academic session.
The Confederation of Nepalese Teachers and the government struck an agreement in September 2023. Teachers demanded that the Education Act be enacted to ensure professional rights and career development for teachers and staff. But at the lack of implementation of their demands, teachers have been protesting in Kathmandu since 2nd of April. A day after the protest began, the Ministry of Education invited teachers to talks, expressing positive support for their demands. The government also decided to invite them for talks on the same day. However, despite a meeting led by Acting Prime Minister Prakash Man Singh at Singhadarbar, the teachers refused to participate, citing lack of credibility in the talks as no conclusion had been reached. On 4th of April, teachers again rejected the invitation for talks made by Minister for Education.
सम्बन्धित विभिन्न विभागीय मन्त्रीज्यूहरू, हाम्रो मान्य शिक्षा मन्त्रीज्यू, हाम्रो टिम त्यहाँ चाहिँ के भनेदेखि छलफलको लागि चाहिँ हामी बस्यौँ मान्य सामान्य प्रधानज्यूको निर्देशनमा। आउनुस् बसौँ भनेको छौँ। 20 गतेदेखि हामी आजसम्म निरन्तर रूपमा हामी यो प्रक्रियामा क्रियाशील छौँ। तर अब आजसम्म हामीले औपचारिक रूपमा ती विषयहरूमा छलफल गर्ने काम चाहिँ सम्पन्न भएको छैन।
After returning from the BIMSTEC meeting, Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli mentioned on 5th of April at the Trivandrum International Airport that teachers' demands would be fulfilled. However, as teachers intensified their protest, the Prime Minister assured a day later that their legitimate demands would be met. The Prime Minister also discussed solutions to the teachers' demands and protests with the Ministers of Finance, Home and Education, as well as the Chief Secretary and other officials. The government again called for talks on April 8th, but the teachers have maintained that Education Act must be enacted immediately in accordance with agreements made on 3 separate occasions in the past.
समस्या समाधान नहुने किसिमको वार्तामा हामी जाँदैनौं। समस्या समाधान गर्ने ताकत भएको ठाउँमा मात्र व्यक्तिसँग मात्रै हामीले वार्ता गर्छौं भनेर वार्ता अस्वीकार गर्यौं। हामीले 3 वटा शर्त अघि सारेका छौं। यसपटक हामी विगतका सहमति सम्बोधन गर्ने अग्रगामी विद्यालय शिक्षा ऐन नलिकन फर्कदैनौं।
ऐन जारी नहुन्जेलसम्म लगातार रूपमा चाहिँ सडक आन्दोलन गरिरहन्छौं। सरकारले हाम्रा माग पूरा नगरुन्जेलसम्म यो सडक आन्दोलन जारी रहन्छ।
As both teachers and the government stand firm on their positions, there have been delays in school results and enrollment programs, and the evaluation of SEE answer sheets has also been affected. This situation further emphasizes the need for teachers to engage in dialogue with the government. Only through dialogue can the complexities of implementing past agreements be understood. The government, meanwhile, has not clarified the difficulties in implementing the agreements. The tendency to reach agreements only after protests reach their peak but failing to implement them has been a major reason for the repeated escalation of teachers' protests.
In our Public Voice segment today, we have asked in several provinces what role should the ruling and opposition sides play in relation to the various protest groups. Let's take a look at what they had to say.
भइरहेको आन्दोलनप्रति सरकार सचेत हुनु पर्यो र संविधान ऐन कानुनको आधारमा त्यसलाई निराकरण गर्नको लागि इच्छा शक्ति जाहेर गर्नु पर्यो।
लोकतान्त्रिक पद्धतिबाट वार्ताद्वारा समाधान गर्नुपर्छ।
उहाँहरुको समस्याको समाधान के छ त भनेर सदनबाट पनि कुरा उठाएर समस्याको समाधान गर्नेतिर ध्यान जाओस्।
सरकार पक्ष विपक्ष पक्ष सबै बसेर एकचोटि छलफल चाहिँ टुङ्गो चाहिँ लगाउनु पर्ने देखिन्छ।
यसमा सत्ता पक्ष बढी जिम्मेदार हुनुपर्ने
यो विषयलाई चाहिँ सिधै सडकमा नगइकन सदनबाटै पास गरेको भए सहज हुन्थ्यो।
संविधान त गरेका कुराहरूलाई सम्बोधन गरेर जाँदाखेरि सबैको सहमति अनुसार देश चल्यो भने राम्रै हुन्छ।
जो राष्ट्रका जिम्मेवारी शक्ति हुन् यी शक्तिले तपाईको चाहिँ यिनी सामान्य हुन् यो आन्दोलनबाट केही पनि हुँदैन भनेर यसलाई जति तपाईको चाहिँ कमजोर ठान्ने हो त्यति तपाईको झन् देशमा चाहिँ अराजकता हुन सक्छ।
It is time now for a short break. We have more news coming up. Welcome back. The third BIMSTEC Agriculture Ministerial meeting has concluded with the conclusion to prioritize cooperation among BIMSTEC member countries for the development of the agricultural sector. At the meeting held in Kathmandu, ministers from 3 countries participated in person, while ministers and representatives from 4 other countries joined virtually. During the meeting, Minister for Agriculture and Livestock Development, Ramnath Adhikari, emphasized the need for cooperation among member countries to tackle challenges posed by climate change and the increasing use of pesticides. India's Agriculture Minister Sivaraj Chauhan highlighted the vast potential for agriculture, livestock and fisheries in BIMSTEC nations and stressed the importance of strengthening cooperation further. Now, 7 parties centered in the Tarai Madhesh region have announced the formation of the front. This comes after the Nepali Congress and CPN-UML formed a government and pro-monarchic activities increased. These Tarai Madhesh centered parties are expecting their power to become stronger through this alliance. However, there is no clear indication as to how long this alliance will last, considering these parties have always experienced fragmentation and division in the past for the sake of power and control.
A new debate has started in political circles after the 7 Tarai Madhesh-centered parties, both those with and without representation in the federal parliament, announced the formation of the Federal Democratic Front. The front has been formed by Madhesh-centered parties to halt the cycle of fragmentation and division and to consolidate power.
मधेसी दलित जनजाति आदिवासी मुस्लिम थारूहरूको अधिकारको लागि मैले पनि लड्न तयारी छु लडिराखेको छु.
The parties in the alliance claim that the front has been formed to address the widespread frustration among the people and to mobilize collective power to alert the government. They believe that by being a united force, they can hold the government accountable while also strengthening themselves. These parties also see the Nepali Congress and CPN-UML coalition's push for constitutional amendments as an opportunity to establish their own agenda and strengthen federalism.
एउटा पक्षले गणतन्त्रलाई रक्षा गर्ने भन्छ भने अर्कोले राजतन्त्रलाई ल्याउने कुरा गर्छ तर संहिताको बारेमा कसैले बोल्दैन संहिताको विषयमा के हुने भनेर कसैले बोल्दैन र हामीले पाएको संहिता पनि खोसी नै हो कि हामीले पाएको अधिकार समानुपातिक समावेशता लगायतको अधिकार पनि खोसी नै हो कि भन्ने चिन्ता लागेर नै हो हामीले पृथक गठबन्धन बनाउन बाध्य भएका हौं ताकि हामी संहिता धर्मनिरपेक्षता समानुपातिक समावेशता सबैको रक्षा गर्न सकौं त्यसको लागि.
At present, the parties in the front hold 19 seats in the federal parliament. They are also represented in the provinces of Koshi, Madhesh, Lumbini and Sudur Pashchim. The front includes Janamat Party led by C.K. Raut, with 5 seats from Janata Samajwadi Party led by Upendra Yadav, 4 from Loktantrik Samajwadi Party and 4 from Nagarik Unmukti. The National Liberation Party, led by Rajendra Mahato, the Janata Pragatishil Party, led by Hridayesh Tripathi, have no representation in the parliament. However, Ashok Rai's Janata Samajwadi Party, which holds 7 seats in the lower house, is not part of the front. The Aam Janata Party, led by Prabhu Shah, and independent lawmakers Amrish Kumar Singh and Yogendra Mandal are also not part of the front. This raises suspicions that the front may have been formed merely for the survival of the parties involved.
विगतका मोर्चाहरू सबै टुटिसके, कायम रहन सकेनन्। तसर्थ यिनीहरूले जुन मोर्चा बनाएको छ त्यो मोर्चालाई कायम राख्न सक्यो भने सरकारलाई प्रभावमा पार्न र आफ्नो उन्नति, आफ्नो लक्ष्य प्राप्तिको लागि यिनीहरूलाई सहयोग प्राप्त हुन सक्छ। तर विगतको इतिहास हेर्दा
Analysts believe that if Madhesh-centered parties, which share the same ideology and principles, can strengthen the front, they can ensure a change in people's perception. However, the parties which have always faced fragmentation have not yet appointed a coordinator for the front, which is seen as a weakness within the alliance. There are also questions about whether this front has been formed solely for the sake of power. At the current scenario, how they move forward, breaking through these issues, will be determined by the actions they take in the coming days.
It is time for our segment Public Pulse, where you text us with your opinion. But before that, let's take a look at yesterday's poll. Yesterday, we had asked you, what's your take on municipality itself distributing fuel for attending party programs? 44% voted for A, misuse of power, 9% voted for B, needs action, and 47% voted for C, an example of bad governance. Now here's today's question. What do you think of the 7 Tarai Madhesh-based parties forming a front once again? Your options are A, power bargain, B, united on agenda, or C, distracting the public. The voting is on. Type NEWS selector option A, B or C and send it to 34001 to share your opinion with us. That is all for the moment. Thank you for watching. Good night.